Hi, this is Julia. Welcome to the YouTube channel, Brotherhood of Light Current. Chris is going to be our host this evening, and this is his new show. We just filmed episode 1, and now we are in episode 2. It's Chris's concert experiences, 1965 to 1990. Are you ready?
Let's go do episode 2 right
All
now.
right.
Okay, cool. Here we go. So, to all you audience out there, the reason I'm doing these shows is because I watch a lot of YouTube and I see a lot of music channels and guys that do concert reviews, album reviews. They really like the 70s and 80s stuff and some and 60s. And a lot of the guys that do these shows they're not old enough to go to any of these concerts in the 70s like this episode's going to be involved with. So I was fortunate to go, and I was, at the right age. And so I went to all these shows during the 70s. So let's check them out. I'm going to get the slideshow going here. So here we go. Okay. So this is going to be episode 2, and let's get the next one. All right. So this is episode 2 with 1972 to 1979. So at this point, I had graduated from high school and I moved up to Lake Tahoe. I started working up there in construction, and I was doing a graphic arts, photography, and ended up having a silkscreen company. But so anyway, I went to a bunch of different shows. I would still go back to the Bay Area to Winterland and see the shows down there in Oakland and stuff like that. But there's also another market that was only 100 miles away, which was Sacramento. There was good shows there. And then also we would go to Reno, which was like 45 or 50 miles away. And then also we'd go to shows in South Lake Tahoe. So I was in a kind of a cool spot to see a lot of concerts. So let's hit the first one. Now, this one's down in Bay Area at Winterland in 1972, and it's Pink Floyd. So this was the Uma Guma and metal tour. And so they had the stereophonic speakers in Winterland, and they had the smoke machines and flames and kind of a theatrical thing, not anything like you see these days, but it was still kind of, cutting edge for 1972. And bands were starting to do stuff like that. And the standard light shows, projection shows were kind of fading away, although Pink Floyd developed that in their show later. But anyway, it was a weird show because the audience would kind of be sitting there cross-legged watching the band. There's playing all this spacey music, and then they would kind of bring the tempo up, and everybody'd stand up and kind of get excited, and then they'd drop it back down. Everybody'd sit back down. It was weird. It was a very moody, spacey show, but that's Pink Floyd. Okay, so next I went to Berkeley Community Theater, and I saw Jeff Beck group. And Jeff Beck was one of my favorite guitar players back in the day. And so then I went and saw Johnny Winter, Peter Frampton, and Foghat, all back in 73 now, in these classic lineups playing at Winterland, which was great. And then another show was Johnny Winter about a year later with Wishbone Ash, which was the dual guitar player combination. And Allman Brothers kind of invented that. And then Wishbone Ash took it to the next level. And then Thin Lizzy took it even beyond that. And then Iron Maiden took it beyond that. So it's kind of one of the first really good dual guitar bands known for that style. Okay, so then we went back down to Winterland again, and we saw Robin Trower, and he was doing the Bridge of Sighs album, which was just a classic. And then it was Steve Marriott All Stars, which was basically Humble Pie. And then the other opener was Tommy Bolin, and he was doing Private Eyes and Teaser material from those records. And I was a really big Tommy Bolin fan, so really lucky to see him. I think he died maybe 6 months later or something. Then the next show I went to was Todd Rundgren with this giant pyramid and the Sphinx and Smoke Machines, Laser Beams, and this was the Raw tour, and this was Utopia, and this was just definitely prog rock, man. They were just jamming hard, but Todd also did some great ballads too. I mean, he's just a multi-talented guy. Uh, been a fan ever since. Uh, really like this period of his music. Okay, so then I went up to Vancouver on a ski trip. Friends of mine that were living in Whistler, and we had to go renew our visa, and we went to Vancouver, and Led Zeppelin went on sale, so we bought tickets, and then we drove down after skiing powder all day, and a week later, and saw Led Zeppelin in Vancouver on the Physical Graffiti tour, and for some reason they never did a show in the Bay Area for that tour. I don't know. There's some cancellations for some reason. I don't know why, but luckily I was able to see them in Vancouver on that tour, and they're probably the best of the 3 times I saw them. They were just really great. 2.5-hour show, totally amazing. Then that fall, our spring, we ended up going down to see Yes at Oakland Coliseum, and they had gotten the original band back together. They got Rick Wakeman, and they were doing Going for the One tour. So I got to see a really good Yes show. It's just fantastic. And they had a great stage, and they had some flame effects, and really cool. So once again, really lucky to see them. Now this next grouping of shows is really an amazing foursome. So down in Fleetwood Mac, right when they got Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined the band, and I had this Buckingham Nicks album, so I was into the solo project of them before they joined Fleetwood Mac, and I also was into Fleetwood Mac, but it was before Rumors. It was just the Fleetwood Mac album, and they were just, it was probably one of their first shows. I mean, it was just amazing. They were just so great, and she was just amazing, just spinning around in this kind of witch outfit and just with her top hat on. It was just awesome. And Lindsey was, he just looked like a young buck. It was great. What an awesome show. And then in Sacramento, I saw Frank Zappa with Zootalours tour, which was kind of a rocker version of Frank Zappa, this smaller band. And then the really great show in Sacramento was Electric Light Orchestra with Jeff Lynne and Little Feat with Lowell George on the same bill, which was, I mean, so here you are, you're seeing 2 of these classic bands, classic rock bands on the same bill at the height of their careers, when they're just fresh, young, and making incredible music. I mean, really lucky to see both those bands. So now the next thing is the Grateful Dead had played their last concert in 74, and I went to one of those shows. It's a Grateful Dead movie. We've all seen that probably. But they had now gotten back together. They recorded the Blues for All album, and there was a concert in Golden Gate Park that it was a Red Octopus Jefferson Starship tour. And so the Starship right here opened up with Red Octopus. And then when they announced that the Grateful Dead were the next band, there was even a louder cheer, and they came out and played the whole Blues for All album. And there was like 30,000 people in Golden Gate Park, and it was the Dead were back. And it was really great because they were our house band, and we would go see them at Winterland or wherever they played in the Bay Area or all over California. And they were just a good time music, and it was always a good concert, and there was always a lot of great people. You knew everybody in the audience. Really fun stuff. And that continues throughout my concert career. Okay, so now we're back in Reno, and Bebop Deluxe is playing down there, and I had free tickets because my buddy worked at the record store, and I did photos for the promoter. So I went and saw Bebop Deluxe, and the guy's really awesome guitar player. I mean, they were just great. And luckily, we had the live album. This is the cover of it. And then Molly Hatchet played down there, and they were great. The Guitar Army, And then also, not in the pictures, we saw Journey and Eddie Money, and that was Journey before Steve Perry joined, the Journey Next tour, which was kind of more prog rock and really cool. Uh, and then we saw Ted Nugent. I saw Ted Nugent, I think it was by myself. And I was shooting photos of Ted, and no, and I got nothing against Ted. He was a great player, great rocker, but the audience was just unbearable. I mean, I was trying to get up close to take pictures, and these people were saying nasty things to me and threatening me, and I just never experienced anything like that. So I ended up, since I had a pass, I ended up going between the barricade and the audience to shoot the show because it was just unbearable in the audience with these people. And I remember I was shooting, I was set up with my long lens, and I was sitting on the side of the stage like this, just waiting for Ted to jump off the riser. And right as he jumped off the riser, this concussion cannon went off, which was like 6 inches in front of my lens, and just about blew my ears up and blew my head off. But it didn't hurt me. But it was it was crazy. I had no idea that was going to happen. At any rate, the next show I went to, which is probably the best show of the 70s, which was The Who and the Grateful Dead. The Who and the Dead at Oakland Coliseum in 1976. And we were up front for the Dead. And of course, they played their 2-hour, show. And we were having a trippy old time. And then, so we just stayed there. And then all these people crowded in, and I was kind of into like instrumental prog rock and stuff like that, and jazz rock. And I'd kind of gotten away from bands like Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. But when I resaw The Who, and they just came out and exploded on stage, and like Townsend was just flying everywhere. Daltrey was just so into it. They were playing in front of 80,000 people. I mean, it was just such an energetic concert. I mean, it was the best time to see The Who ever. Of all the show, I've seen them 3 times, and that was just it. I mean, they were just, there's something about musicians at a certain age and a certain maturity in their music and their performance levels where they're just going to max out. And this would happen to be the best Who show ever. And Keith Moon was still in the band, and he was just, God, he was just all over that kit, just what a personality. You can see him in these pictures where he's just going off. So yeah, this show was one of the best. Now, the next show was a doubleheader weekend. We drove down to Sacramento. We saw Alvin Lee, and 10 years after. And then we saw Sammy Hagar with his solo act after he got out of Montrose. And then the next night we went to Winterland and saw Richie Blackmore's Rainbow with Ronnie James Dio and Cozy Powell. And I was a big fan. And then REO Speedwagon was the headliner. And, Blackmore destroyed his guitar. It was a great set, but it was cut a little bit short. I think if he was a headliner, it would have been a lot better show, a longer show. And I'll never forgive REO for that. They're a little just too Midwest for me, and they're kind of whatever, Midwest rock, I guess, Yankee rock. I don't know, but they're a good band. They were good, but I came to see Rainbow, and I'm so lucky to see them because 6 months later, Dio left. So got lucky once again. Okay, so this next show, kind of almost as good as the Who show. It's 1978, summer 78, and it's Mick Jagger's birthday. It's the last show on the American tour of Miss You, Some Girls tour with Miss You. The song was one of the songs they played. And the bill was Peter Tosh, Eddie Money, Carlos Santana, who played an hour and a half set. And it was really great. I love Santana. I've never seen him. And then the Stones came out. We had to wait an hour and a half in between Santana And the Stones played about 2.5 hours, and they were just fantastic. And I'm probably like right here in the audience. That's where I was sitting. And there was once again 80,000 people sold out. So got really lucky. Got to see the Stones once again. And this is probably I've seen them like 5 times. This is probably the best show that I've seen them play. Then that summer, we went down to Carson City. Oh no, this is Sacramento. Excuse me. So this was a show in Sacramento, and it was, as you can see on the poster here, Journey, Marshall Tucker, Thin Lizzy, and the Cars. So the Cars opened up the show, and me and my girlfriend at the time, we knew every song. We had that first album. They played the whole album, start to finish. We were like singing along with the band. And after the show, Rick Acaso came over, this guy, and he walked over to the edge of the stage and took a picture of me and my girlfriend, like, there's our first 2 fans in California. And then Thin Lizzy came on, and Gary Moore was in the band. It was a Black Rose tour. And then the next band was Journey, and it was the first Steve Perry album had just come out, Infinity, I believe is the name of it. And they played the whole album. And with Steve Perry, it was just, flawless, his voice. And then Marshall Tucker came out, and they were like the height of their career at that point. They had like 3 hit albums. And so it was really an unusual bill, but it was a hell of a day of rock and roll. Okay, so next we went down to Carson, and it was Blue Oyster Cult in once again, it was still 78. And they were the headliner. They had a laser light show, and then UFO. And if anybody knows about UFO, that 1978, that tour was the last tour with this guy, Michael Schenker. And it was the, heralded version of UFO. They did the live album. And so they're playing, we're watching them play them up close. And they did, like Lights Out, or, one of their a couple classics. And then they went into Love to Love, which is kind of like a Stairway to Heaven type of song, where they start off slow and do all these intricate chord changes, and then they break into power chords and build up and do, blast into leads and screaming vocals. And the power goes out about 1/3 of the way into the song. And so for like 5 minutes, it's just a complete blackout. And then boom, when the power goes back on, they just broke right into the exact same spot in the song and just continued on. I mean, that's how professional they were. It was really amazing. Kind of blew my mind. Then the next show we went to after that was a continuation of the last one, but it was a Thin Lizzy and Journey down in Reno, and dual bill. It was the Black Rose tour, and Gary Moore was the guitar player. And just once again, lucky to see Thin Lizzy at their finest, with Gary Moore, who's one of the greatest blues rock guitar players. And Phil was just on his game. He was, his voice was on. He was just great. So uh, really lucky to see these bands at this period. Then I went and saw Utopia, the Road to Utopia album, and I saw them a couple times in Sacramento, and I saw them at the Greek Theater in Berkeley. And if you've ever been to the Greek Theater in Berkeley, it's probably one of the best venues in the country. It's just awesome. And it's outdoors. It wraps around with cement, and it's got big columns behind the stage. It's just a great place to see a show. And then I saw Kansas down in Reno at the basketball gym. And then I saw the first Tom Petty tour, and then You're Gonna Get It tour. And then this Hall & Oates show was just amazing. I mean, it was the Red Ledge tour, and they still had the original band from the 70s, and they were just fantastic. There wasn't a lot of people there, but they just performed incredible. I mean, Daryl Hall's voice is just something else, man. It was just so good. I mean, I was just blown away by them. So it was just, this is all in the same year. And then the kind of end of the year was Jethro Tull and Uriah Heep in Reno. And of course, Jethro Tull is always great. I do believe that the Thick as a Brick tour was a little bit better back in 72, but this was 78. They did that tour, and both these bands were, classic British bands. Now, this band, the Tubes, was a local San Francisco band, and they played at the casinos in South Shore. They played at Kings Beach Bowl. They played numerous times. I saw them, and they were always great. And a few of the guys. I know Prairie. I worked with him, the drummer, and then Pat Travers. I saw him that year in at Carson City with Ronnie Montrose, War, and the Outlaws, and Pat Thrall was the other guitar player, and he was really good on both shows. Just amazing, really great. And he's a drummer from Whitesnake. Was playing with him at that point, and probably the peak of Pat Travers' career. And then now in Reno, it's probably now it's 79, and Jay Giles kind of had a reunion, got back together, and they were really great. And then they played with this band April Wine from Canada, who was a really good kind of pop rock band. And then this was a really cool show at the Greek Theater. I mentioned the Greek Theater being a great venue. It was Al Di Meola and then Carlos Santana. They played two separate sets. And then at the end, they came out and jammed, and they did Jimmy Page song, Whole Lot of Lovin', which is pretty amazing. Then in Reno that year, I saw Frank Zappa, and he had a young guitar player named Steve Vai playing with him. And this is a picture of that tour. And Steve was really great. And, he's obviously one of my favorite modern guitar players of the day. And now I also saw in a club in Reno a reunion of Steppenwolf, which was, what can you say? It's classic rock. And then Spirit, with the original Spirit lineup with JoJo Gunn and Randy California and Ed Cassidy. And so that was great. I didn't get to see them in their heyday in the early 70s, but at least they came around at the end of the decade. Okay, so we got some more shows here coming up, and here we go. So then Cheap Trick had come out with the Budokan record, and they played in Reno on the Dream Police tour. I saw that, and you can't complain. They're great. Gotta love them. American rock and roll. And then this band from England called the Babies. I saw them 3 times during that decade, and they played in Reno this one time, and they were just absolutely. They were almost like the Grateful Dead, where they'd start one song and they'd go into another, and then off that one they'd go into another, and then they'd go back to the original one they started, and then end the other one. I mean, and it was just rock and roll. I mean, this guy was like in his front room just having the time of his life. I mean, he was so into it. John Waite, the singer, and the whole band was on it. So we were so into it. We went to the next night and drove down to Sacramento to see him. And they played a completely different show. They played just all these ballads and kind of hits, where the Reno show was just rock and roll, blood and guts, man. It was like just amazing, because most bands just do the same show on each tour. But these guys were obviously, rocked out. Then I went down to see Rod Stewart in Reno. I know, in the Cow Palace, San Francisco, and he this was at the height of his career. Do You Think You're Sexy tour, and Do Blondes Have More Fun, and that was a fun show. Just kind of cliche, but I love Rod Stewart. I loved Jeff Beck, Rod Stewart Truth album. It's one of my favorite early '68 albums. So, and I like the Faces too. So. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end here, and we went and saw Sammy Hagar a lot. He was a local guy from the Bay Area, and he had his own. He played the college circuit, so I saw him in Chico. I saw him in Fresno. I saw him in Sacramento. He just played. He played in Reno, and this was in Sacramento with Heart, and and the God, what's his name? Jeff Watson from Night Ranger was the opener. And then the end of the year, we went down, we saw the Grateful Dead the night before New Year's. And then the next night went to Oakland Coliseum and saw the Fabulous Poodles and Chuck Berry and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And they did this Damn the Torpedoes album. And they had broken big at that point. They were headlining, basketball arenas. And this kicked in 1980. So that's the end of the 1980. Now it's 1980 and New Year's with Tom Petty. And it was, really a great show. So we got episode 3 going to be coming up a week after I show this one. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I can go back to me here. And, like I said, I got to see all these shows. I got to see these bands when they were at their prime, when they were young, and a lot of people never got a chance to see them. And I'm looking back and really lucky to see them. And once again, I got to thank Pete Pardo for kind of turning me on, the memories of this stuff. And I actually made a list of every rock show I've gone to, and there's including all these ones I worked, there's over 3,000 concerts I've been involved with, one way or another, as a spectator or performing my light show with the band. So anyway, folks, I want to say have a good one and tune in next week for episode 3. Signing off.